So, we often hear this phrase, continuous improvement. It gets talked about a lot, like it's the absolute gold standard for making progress.
Right. It sounds positive, doesn't it? Always getting better.
Exactly. But what if? What if sometimes that whole idea of just improving is actually maybe a bit of a shortcut?
Hmm. A shortcut. How so?
Well, like it's masking deeper things.
Hmm.
Systemic issues that don't just need improvement, they need real transformation.
Ah, I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of just tweaking what we have, maybe we need to fundamentally rethink it, rebuild it even.
Precisely. And that's really the core question, the sort of provocative idea behind our deep dive today.
Yeah, the sources we've been digging into, they really push this idea that true change, especially around equity issues, it's not just about making small improvements.
It needs something else.
It does. It needs a different kind of insight. And the sources say this insight comes from digging into the levels of data in a specific way through something they call deep listening.
Okay, deep listening. Let's unpack that. So we've been immersed in these excerpts, mainly from Ch4.pdf and some related stuff, and they lay out this really interesting framework, the equity transformation cycle.
That's right.
So our mission here for this deep dive is basically to peel back the layers of that cycle. We want to understand how this qualitative stuff, this street data, can actually reveal surprising things.
Things that can drive fundamental change, especially in places like schools, in education.
Exactly. And hopefully, by the end of our chat, you, our listener, will come away with a kind of fresh perspective, a new way to maybe think about tackling complex problems and, fostering real inclusion.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. There's this dominant model, right? We see it a lot in business, but it's definitely bled into education and other fields too. It's continuous improvement.
Right.
It often comes from things like total quality management, TQM, that business philosophy focused on refining processes, getting better measurable outcomes.
Yeah, efficiency, metrics.
Exactly. And you see methods tied to it, like the Plan to Study Act cycle, PDSA.
Yeah, PDSA. Plan something, do it, study what happened, act on it.
It's basically a structured loop for solving problems. Think about like constantly tuning up a factory line to make it run smoother or faster. It's great for that kind of thing.
And it sounds so logical, doesn't it? So straightforward. You plan, you do, you study, you act. Seems perfectly sensible. Proactive even.
Totally. On the surface, it makes perfect sense.
But there's a but coming, I feel. Our sources, they raise a flag here, don't they? Especially when we start talking about genuine equity. Where does this neat little cycle maybe fall short?
Well, yeah. While it sounds good, if you look closer, there are potential issues. The sources point out that the study part, collecting the data that actually comes after you've already planned and implemented a change, 2 steps later.
Okay.
And that delay, that sequence, it can lead to what they call superficial equity if you're not careful, because you might not be addressing the actual root causes of the problems, the systemic stuff.
Right. You're acting before you fully understand the why.
Kind of. Think of it like this. Continuous improvement might help you build a slightly faster, maybe shinier horse and buggy.
Okay.
But the sources are suggesting that sometimes the real issue isn't just improving the buggy. Sometimes you need to invent the car,
A completely different thing.
Exactly. Continuous improvement often focuses on optimizing what's already there. It doesn't always push you to question if the thing itself, the whole system, needs a radical rethink.
Okay, so that's a really helpful distinction. If continuous improvement is maybe like treating symptoms, then equity transformation is going for the disease itself.
That's a good way to put it.
This isn't about small adjustments. It's a fundamental shift, a shift in whole systems, specifically aiming at those deep-seated, seemingly intractable equity challenges, things like systemic racism, implicit bias.
And what the sources term white supremacy culture.
Right, and maybe we should pause on that term for a second.
Yeah, that's important. The sources are clear. They aren't using white supremacy culture to label individuals. It's used as a framework.
A framework to understand what?
To understand the sort of unspoken norms, the values, the default ways of doing things within institutions that can end up perpetuating racial inequities, often unintentionally, but the impact is there.
Okay, so equity transformation goes beyond just improving that system.
Way beyond. It aims to fundamentally and radically transform the experiences of children and families at the margins. It sort of rejects the idea that just making things a bit better is enough, when what's actually needed is a whole new experience for those most affected.
And the key to unlocking this kind of transformation, according to the sources, is something called street data,
Yes, street data.
which is presented as like the opposite of dashboard data or satellite data.
Exactly. Dashboard data is your test scores, attendance rates, the big aggregate numbers you see on spreadsheets or charts. Satellite or map data gives you that high-level overview.
The bird's eye view.
All right. Street data, though, is down on the ground. It's described as a minuscule look at what's actually going on for children. It's about understanding the nuances, the stories, the lived realities.
Focusing on root causes over quick fixes.
Precisely. Because that quantitative dashboard data, it can give you this illusion of knowing what's going on.
An illusion, because it hides the complexity.
It can, yeah. Like seeing just the tip of the iceberg and thinking you understand the whole massive thing underneath. Street data is about getting up close, understanding those hidden dynamics.
I like the analogy they use of pounding the pavement to get this data. It really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does.
It suggests it's active, it's relational, it's not just sending out a survey, it's about building connections.
Yeah, the sources really emphasize that. The process of collecting street data is as important as the data itself. It helps build relational capital, trust, and shift the culture.
It shifts the focus from just numbers to narratives, to people's actual experiences, which feels, well, transformative in itself.
Absolutely. So if street data is the sort of raw material, the foundation.
Then deep listening is how you gather it and make sense of it.
Exactly. Deep listening is presented as the absolute heart of it. The core stance, really, for school transformation and the main guiding principle for collecting street data.
And it's more than just hearing words, right?
Much more. It's about truly trying to understand what is most important in the sources you have shared. It means deeply tuning into diverse voices, especially those who often go unheard or feel unempowered.
And it's not just about listening outwards, is it? There's an internal component, too.
A huge one. Deep listening requires cultivating serious self-awareness, being aware of your own biases, your assumptions, the lenses you see the world through.
So you need to question your own stuff, your preconceived ideas.
Right. It encourages critical thinking about yourself, actually. It's active, it's engaged, and, yeah, pretty introspective.
And the sources get quite specific about how to practice this, don't they? They mention Mehrabian's research.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. The finding that, like, only 7% of meaning and communication comes from the actual words spoken.
Only 7%, so the vast majority is what? Tone and body language?
Exactly. 38% from tone of voice, and a massive 55% from body language. Understanding that just completely changes how you approach listening, doesn't it?
It really does. It means you have to pay attention to how things are said, not just what is said, looking for emotions, for those subtle cues.
Invitations for authentic sharing, as the sources put it.
Wow, 93% nonverbal. Makes you wonder how much we miss in everyday interactions.
A lot, probably.
And they mention a specific tool for practicing this.
Yeah.
Diet conversations.
Right. These structured pairs conversations, they're designed to create a really intentional space for emotional release, reflection, and healing.
And there are clear rules, right? Like equal time, no interrupting.
Yeah, equal time, no interruptions, double confidentiality. What's shared stays there. And a really important one, no complaining about colleagues. It's about creating a genuinely safe container for sharing that's foundational for getting real street data.
Safe space is key. Then there's that amazing visual, the Chinese character for listening.
Oh, yeah, that's powerful. How it's broken down into 5 parts.
The ear, the eyes, undivided attention, the heart, and the king representing integrity.
Exactly. It just paints this picture of holistic listening. It's not just an intellectual thing. It involves your senses, your focus, your empathy, your ethical core, especially important when listening at the margins.
A full body, full spirit kind of engagement. And this connects to other concepts too, like neural listening.
Yeah, which sounds technical, but the idea is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
It's about consciously training our brains, kind of calibrating our neural circuits to really receive information without immediate judgment.
Creating a mental space that feels safe for the speaker.
Right. And that leads into radical inclusion. The intentional act of disrupting inequity by genuinely valuing all the stories, all the truths, even conflicting ones, creating an environment where every voice feels heard and safe.
So thinking about all this power of deep listening, what really stands out to you from the sources?
For me, it's how much it asks of the listener. It's not passive. And it connects to that idea that knowledge isn't just about having information.
It's about understanding and applying it.
Right. And deep listening is the absolute key to both. It helps you truly understand someone else's experience, which then allows you to apply that understanding meaningfully. It reminds me of that Margaret Wheatley quote the sources mention.
Oh, the one about community.
Yeah. Whatever the problem, community is the answer. How we are together in our relationships is the solution. Deep listening is how we are together in relationships. It makes relationship building the core of change.
That's a powerful connection, community relationship listening, which leads us nicely into the actual framework, the equity transformation cycle,
The ETC, yeah.
described as a fluid yet structured process, central to this whole transformation idea.
And fluid is a key word there. It's important to understand this isn't some rigid, linear checklist. It's complex.
Not like those simple cause and effect models we sometimes see.
Exactly. It involves these 4 core values, or maybe mindsets is a better word. Listen, uncover, reimagine, and move. And they're not really steps in sequence. They kind of flow into each other, inform each other constantly.
Okay, so normally we might want to jump straight to fixing things, right? To the move part, maybe. But this cycle says, no, you start with listen.
Absolutely. Phase 1 is listen, and the mindset is radical inclusion.
So back to that deep listening, listening to the voices from the margins, trying to uncover those unheard experiences, identify the real equity challenges.
And it involves truly valuing well-being. The sources make that neat point, that value is the root word of evaluate.
Ah, interesting. So true evaluation starts with valuing the human experience.
That's the idea. And there's a really powerful story in the materials that brings this phase to life. The story of Alyssa, a student, and her mom, Jackie.
Right, I remember this. Alyssa talks about being pulled out of a black girls club.
Yeah, experiencing racial slurs, feeling, in her words, wiggly in her body, and just feeling like she had no voice.
And she says something like, I just wanted to graduate, maybe with some fun experience. It felt like that was taken away.
Exactly, that raw feeling.
Yeah.
And her mom, Jackie, talks about this loss of a safe space for black students. That's the street data.
That feeling of being wiggly, the loss of a safe space, you'd never get that from a spreadsheet, would you?
Never. But those are the crucial emotional truths. They're absolutely central to understanding the real impact of inequity. It just cuts right through the noise.
So what stands out to you from Alyssa and Jackie's story, thinking about this listen phase?
For me, it really hammers home how many voices like Alyssa's probably go unheard if we only look at the big numbers. That safe space insight is critical. You only get that through listening deeply. It reveals the why behind potential issues that aggregate data might hint at or completely miss.
Yeah, it really underscores why starting with listening is non-negotiable in this model. Okay, so once we've truly listened, gathered that rich street data, the next phase is uncover.
Phase 2, uncover. And the mindset here is curiosity.
So this is about digging deeper, getting to the root causes of the inequities we heard about in the listen phase.
Exactly. Pushing beyond the surface. The sources use that classic iceberg analogy.
Right. What's hidden beneath the waterline, the structures, the patterns, the beliefs that are driving the surface behaviors or outcomes.
Yeah. Or they talk about peeling the onion, layer by layer, getting deeper into the inquiry, not just accepting the first easy answer.
And this involves asking tough questions, right? Like challenging our own assumptions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Guiding questions like, what are our assumptions going in? Or what is most surprising in the street data we gathered? It's about being genuinely curious, radically open, even if what you uncover feels uncomfortable or challenges your views.
Okay. Listen, then uncover with curiosity. That leads to phase 3. Reimagine.
Reimagine, yeah. And the mindset here is creativity.
So this is where solutions start to emerge, but it's not top-down.
No, absolutely not. This is about co-designing, working with marginalized community members, not just doing things for them.
Moving beyond just fixing the existing system to actually creating something new, something radically transformed.
Right. The sources talk about using things like participatory action research, KAR, empowering the community members themselves to be researchers and designers of solutions based on their own lived experiences.
And asking really different kinds of questions.
Totally. Creative, open-ended questions like the examples given. When you feel wiggly in your body, what kinds of movements do you want to make? Connecting back to Alyssa's feeling.
Or, if you had a magic wand to change one thing about carpet time, what would it be? It's playful, almost, but gets at deep needs.
Exactly. It's not about finding fault. It's about imagining possibilities, building something new together.
Okay, so listen. Uncover, reimagine, and finally, phase 4, move. The mindset of courage.
Yeah. This is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. taking courageous action to actually implement the changes you've reimagined.
And the sources are realistic here. They say change is hard.
Very realistic. This phase requires being ready to face resistance, recalcitrance, defensiveness, because changing systems, especially around equity, often involves discomfort and pushback.
It reminds me of that Frederick Douglass quote they included.
If there is no struggle, there is no progress.
Exactly. It acknowledges that transformation isn't easy. It takes courage to push through.
And interestingly, the sources bring in the idea of love as a guiding principle here.
Love in systems change.
Yeah. They quote Adrienne Marie Brown, who talks about what it would look like if love was the central practice. She says, "We would want to listen, support, and grow. We would understand that the strength of our movement is the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured in their depth."
Wow. So transformation isn't just a technical process, it's deeply human, rooted in connection, care, and yeah, maybe even love.
That's the powerful idea presented, that the depth of our relationships fuels the courage needed to move.
Okay. So let's just try and pull this all together. We've journeyed from looking critically at continuous improvement towards this deeper idea of transformation.
Right. A transformation powered by that rich, qualitative street data.
And guided by the equity transformation cycle, which hinges on deep listening, using our ears, eyes, attention, heart, integrity.
And driven by those four interconnected mindsets: radical inclusion and listening,
Curiosity in uncovering,
creativity and reimagining.
and courage in moving.
It's really a shift towards understanding not just what's happening, but why it matters on a human level. And seeing how connected relationships are to making any real lasting change.
It embraces complexity, and it centers the wisdom found within the community, especially at the margins.
Yeah, valuing those voices that are too often drowned out.
So, thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening right now? Whether you're thinking about your work, your community, maybe even just your personal interactions.
It's a good question to ponder.
If this kind of deep transformation really asks us to be present, to be empathetic, to connect with stories, how might adopting that deep listening posture more often, more consciously, change how you navigate things? Like maybe conflict, or just the sheer amount of information flying at you every day.
That's definitely something to mull over. How could listening differently change? Well, maybe everything.
Something for you to explore on your own.